if I look at English history and what we have done in Africa, in Asia.
What, civilizing populations?
Well, when you say civilizing populations.
Even today, governments say that the purpose of their army and their foreign policy is to benefit themselves.
Exactly.
And they're honest about it.
Well, yeah, some of them are honest about it, whereas others say we want girls to go to school. That's why we're there bombing them.
I'm afraid.
People have tried to conquer Afghanistan for centuries.
That's irrelevant. The fact is, Afghanistan is currently in a dark age.
Listen to me. Even if you argue that, that's their country. That's their business. How they want to run their country is their country. Look, if you look...
You divide the world into the House of War and the House of Islam. What does that mean?
Look, the point here is this. We have had, throughout Islamic history, episodes where there are some people who have been the way you're describing. And then we've had over 800 years in Spain where the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims lived harmoniously together, to the extent that when the Christian crusaders from the north came down, the Christians and the Jews asked the Muslims if they could come and reside with them in North Africa. And even today you find Jews in Morocco. So, because the Christians that were living harmoniously with the Muslims were seen as traitors by the invading crusaders that were coming from the north, because they were seeing them as colluding with the enemy, as it were. So out of fear of reprisal, the Christian and the Assalamu alaikum, the Christian and the Jewish communities, many of them, left with the Muslims to reside in North Africa. So I'm not saying it was always rosy. I'm not saying people always behaved according to the tenets of Islam. But yes, of course, there were people who behaved very badly, very un-Islamically.
But that wasn't my question. My question was, do you understand the distinction between the House of Islam and the House of War?
House of, sorry, what?
House of Islam and the House of War.
War?
That distinction, where is that? Is that the Sunnah or is it in the...
According to Islam and the general understanding, Islam has the opportunity to do expansive war. And it also has the ability to form treaties and live peacefully. And it has, and it's incumbent upon the rulers who have the treaties not to be treacherous. You can't break the treaty, even with a non-Muslim. Even with a non-Muslim. So if I have a treaty with you, Greg, I'm not going to attack your people. Your people are safe here. You can do this here. And then suddenly I think, ooh, you know what? He seems a bit weak because he was fighting those people over there. He's going to topple. I'll just jump in there and bash him. You can't do that.
Deny that Islam was spread by the sword.
Absolutely, 100%. And the reason why I would say that is that, I'll tell you why I believe that very strongly, is that Islam was in India for what, probably 1,000 years? Yet today you still have majority, 700 million Hindus. Again, I'm not saying it was always rosy. I'm not saying that people were, but however, this notion that Islam was forced upon the people, this may have happened in history, but it was not the general rule, and it was not, from my understanding, the Islamic... Sorry?
At least you admit it did happen at points in time.
Yeah, I
of course, North Africa was converted to Islam by invading Muslim armies.
Yes.
Yeah. And the concept of the fact that people who are in conquered territory have to either pay the jizya, convert to Islam, or fall to the sword.
Yes, absolutely. Yes,
is a very, very aggressive way.
I'll tell you, Greg. I'll tell you why that's not. I'll tell you why that's not. First of all, jizya is only paid by the people who are able to be fighting in the army. If you're old, you don't pay the jizya. If you're disabled or you have a problem, you don't pay the jizya. If you don't have the means, in other words, you're completely destitute, unemployed, whatever, you don't have to pay the jizya. when you...
But if you're able-bodied man,
you have to pay the jizya. Now, but what does that get you? The jizya means that if there is a war, as a Muslim, it's incumbent upon me to defend your home as it is to defend my home.
For a moment. In fact,
that's Islamic law.
The verse that says that they should be compelled to pay the jizya or else forced to convert.
Yes, not forced to convert.
Mentions
fought.
They should feel themselves subdued.
Okay, that's some translations.
That's a direct translation.
No, you can't say it's a direct. You can say that is some translation, some views within certain scholars.
The clear message is that Islam should predominate and that people who are not Muslims are second-class citizens.
Okay, look, Greg, what we have to be fair about here is this. Throughout history, we have seen many invading armies and many people, including many of our, let's say, European, American countries who have gone and conquered and ruled. And what we have to do is we have to be fair. We have to look at it as how were people treated under all of these different ways, different conquerings, right? And what we do find under Islam is that the Prophet Muhammad explicitly said, this is an explicit statement of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that a non-Muslim living in a Muslim land who's under the protection of the Muslim, he's paying his jizya, he's keeping by the law, if you treat him unjustly, I will be his advocate on the Day of Judgment. Now, what that means is that if I treat you unjustly, unfairly, I take away your rights. So your rights, you want to be a Christian, and I take away those rights from you, this is unjust. If I steal your property, take from you, harm you in any way, harm your children in any way, this is unjust. If I deliberately don't give you employment, squeeze you to ruin, this would be unjust. I'm not treating you fairly. If there's a court case between you and me, and you're right, and the judge rules in my favor because I'm Muslim and you're non-Muslim, this would be unjust. All of these things are warned against.
That would not happen in a Muslim country, that a Muslim judge ruling for Muslim favor.
I'm not saying that Muslims are perfect, and I'm not saying, but listen, we have to be honest, right? I was born in this country, England. If I look at English history and what we have done in Africa, in Asia...
What, civilizing populations?
Well, when you say civilizing populations, if you look at India, they broke the hands of the weavers so the British could produce the garments and tax the Indians to buy those.
That is a crime.
I agree. But this happened. You look at Kenya. You look at the camps that were set up, the brutality that we, the English people, I'm not English, I'm British, right? But what we did to those people, those poor people, quite frankly, if you look at colonial history and what we did, it's bloody, very bloody.
There are many massacres, and there was a clear and potent racism in operation at the time.
No, I don't say...
At the same time, the Third World benefited from British industry and British genius, because that is why Africa now has roads, telecommunications, lighting, because we, the West, created the science behind the technology that's providing all of these things. So therefore, it's not all one-sided. Yes, and I think it's a little naive to suggest that in those days, which is 300 or 400 years ago, when there was a big disparity in economic geopolitical power,
of course,
that the weak will not dominate. Sorry, the strong will not dominate the weak to a certain extent.
Yes.
I don't defend all the atrocities by any means, but I understand the racism because that was what they thought in those days.
But you know what it is, Greg? You know this notion of, for example, we built roads and we built railways and we helped the people.
Yes.
If you look at my father, my mother, they come from India. I'm ethnically Indian, right? When the British went in, India had about 71% of the world economy.
That's absolutely false. Absolute.
71%. When the English left, it was down to 3%.
How do you measure that?
How do you measure that? Well, this was a statistic that I heard mentioned by the famous writer.
But it's simply not true. In fact, what Indians sometimes say is they had half the world or third of the world. I've never heard anybody claim 70%.
Anyway, look, great.
And the point is, if India was so strong, why did they allow a small European nation to dominate them for so many years?
So I'll tell you why. The British were incredibly clever, ingenious, and I would say a masters at strategy, and that's why they won.
Divide and rule?
They did not win by having a greater power. No, they didn't. That's the beauty.
Organisation and power.
No, they didn't do it. If the Indians had revolted against the English invasion, they would have destroyed them.
So why didn't they?
Because the English were very, very clever the way they strategically moved into India.
So they were
I'll tell you what they did.
Were they smarter than the Indians, then, were they?
They were certainly smarter than those people who were the rulers at the time.
I'm just teasing you.
No, look, it's a fact is a fact, right? The English did not win because of a superior. How many thousand men went into India?
I know, not that many.
Not that many.
Which is all the more embarrassing for your ancestral heritage.
No, it's not.
You were dominated by such a small posse.
The thing is, there are many embarrassments throughout history that many nations have suffered. And many times they've suffered those embarrassments because the leadership that they had at the time was basically incompetent and corrupt.
But if you go back to those times, India was a collection of
right.
states.
So what they did when they went there is they went to perhaps the largest Mughal empires, and they said, look, we're friends with you, we'll trade with you, we'll let you look after this and that. We just need help to defeat that one and that one and that one and that one. Greed obviously took the better of the individual.
I don't know, that's a very
The person went against his own, did treachery against his own people with a foreign power, and that sounds great to me, right? So they went
I haven't read extensively the East India, so I'll put a grain of salt.
And then the East India Company was obviously formed, right? And what they...
Britain committed
very, very
a lot of
clever.
atrocities in India. Britain had a very checkered history in India. But all I'm saying is it's not all one-sided. You know, when we're told that Europeans are uniquely racist and there's white supremacists everywhere, the fact is we have something to be proud of in our history too, because we created the modern world. And yes, there was a lot of things we did which we would rather not have done. And if we go back in time, we would not do. But at the same time, I think the world should be thankful for the fact that the West has created so much wealth.
Well, I think that if one uses that type of thinking, then it would be fair for the world to also be thankful for the 1,000 years of science and technology and medicine that the Arabs came up with,
which was non-existent.
And should be thankful and grateful to the Greeks for the philosophy and the writings.
Oh, yes.
You understand my point?
Absolutely.
So
the Arabs were at one point quite advanced.
Yes. So what I'm trying to say, well, 800 years, 700 years, whatever you want to say.
The last 400 years, zip.
Well, the last 250, 300 years perhaps, right? But the point I'm trying to make to you is that it was not because they were Arab or they had slightly brown skin.
No, I know, of course not.
Or the white man had a white skin.
I agree.
Or was from Europe. But this is how
organization.
This is how knowledge, culture, knowledge, power, money, military might, the advent of gunpowder, guns, all of these things make it.
Old, dark islands.
Yes.
Led the world in the Industrial Revolution.
I totally agree.
Led the world in science.
I totally agree.
For hundreds of years.
Look, there are lots of things the West should celebrate and feel good about. I totally agree. And technology, science, the Industrial Revolution. I love watching those programs. I love watching those programs of how teapots and China was made in England after they looked at the Chinese and how meticulously, he went through what temperature and how long. And after months and months and months of trying different things, he comes up with a perfect English China, right? I admire people like that.
That's industry. In fact, it was interesting that up until the 15th century, China was well ahead of
That's
Europe.
Right.
In
That's right.
Every respect.
That's right.
However, China did close itself up from the rest
That's
of the world.
right.
Europe continued to develop. And
Right.
also the fact that Europe had a lot of independent states that were competing with each other
Yes.
inspired them to be more
Yes.
proactive in terms of developing war technology which could
Yeah,
be for warfare
right.
and the economy.
Right. So there's lots of things to celebrate.
Sure.
And there are lots of things that perhaps when we look at our colonial expansion and the supposed benefits that we created, what we have to realize is one or two things, I think. Number one, our intention, first of all, was not to benefit the people, but in fact was to benefit ourselves. Our intention was money, power, wealth, dominance.
That's true for all.
Of course, I agree.
Indians place themselves first, which they should.
Look,
The Russians.
I'm not saying that this is somehow unique to the European. I'm saying that's what drove most people.
Even today, governments say that the purpose of their army and their foreign policy is to benefit themselves.
Exactly.
And they're honest about it.
Well, yeah, some of them are honest about it, whereas others say we want girls to go to school. That's why we're there bombing them. But that's another point. Look.
Well, that's true. No,
exactly.
In the case of Afghanistan, we're there to try and improve the lives of
well, I would totally listen. I would totally.
Afghans falling back into the dim dark ages.
Look,
I'm afraid.
People have tried to conquer Afghanistan for centuries.
That's irrelevant. The fact is, Afghanistan is currently in a dark age.
Listen to me. People have tried to go and conquer Afghanistan for centuries. Strategic reasons, power. Today, there's, I think, $1 trillion of lithium apparently hiding under the mountains. So there's many reasons. Girls going to school is not one of them, even though that is the narrative. We all know that.
It is one of them. We want Afghanistan to join the civilized world, by which I mean advanced.
Greg, I implore you to read between the lines, and the bombing of Afghanistan, the strategic importance of Afghanistan, the mineral resources of Afghanistan have far more of a part to play, Greg, than the well-being of the Afghans.
You're saying that the original invasion of Afghanistan, when we threw the Taliban out after 9/11,
yes,
that was solely because we were after the minerals in the hills.
No,
nothing to do with the fact that they had harbored bin Laden.
Okay,
and that they were imposing a way of life upon their population, the Taliban, which goes against all precepts in the modern West about the way civilization.
The Taliban were far more brutal when they were being trained and supported by the American forces, special forces. They were our friends. They were our allies.
Why were they our friends?
They were our allies.
Why were they our
because
friends?
They were obviously fighting the Russians.
Correct.
Right.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Right.
Temporarily.
Okay, but the same Afghans, they had the same tribal issues and the same issues they had there, yet they were our best buddies.
They were not our best buddies.
Right?
We held our nose and provided them with arms and material.
Oh, we supplied them with arms. We supplied them with training.
So they could fight the Russians.
Okay, now, so the issue was we didn't complain about the girls not going to school then. We didn't complain about all of those things. So my point to you is a simple one. Look, my point is a simple one. We are often told in the West as to why we're doing certain things. When is it humanly reasonable, and I would say as a humanist, as a secularist, as a liberal, as a sensible, even a person who believes in the God, who believes in freedom, he believes that people should not be innocent, people should not be killed or harmed or injured. How can it be reasonable to anybody that a man in the caves in Afghanistan makes videos because apparently he funded some people to go and commit a terrorist act, that now we go and bomb a country where tens of thousands of civilians are killed, maimed, and all sorts of economic problems and other problems occur as a consequence of this one person.
After we invaded Afghanistan and threw out the Taliban had a government, a democratically elected government, for 20 years. Only recently has that been overthrown, in fact last year.
Assalamualaikum, Greg, nice to see you.
So, in fact,
you mean President Karzai?
Yes, and his predecessors.
Yeah.
So yes, he may have been.
Do you know
corrupt.
who Karzai was?
He may have been supremely corrupt.
No, but do you know where? You know he worked with Cheney at one time.
So what?
My point to you is that if you put a puppet government in a country, which America has done routinely, by the way, has a track record.
Puppet government. Are you saying the Taliban has the support of the majority of the population?
I'm not listening. All I'm saying to you is this: we do not have the right to put somebody in somebody else's country that it will agree with us and sing our song and do our work.
Threw out the Taliban, which is an aggressive.
First of all, look.
Islamic fundamentalist.
Even if you argue that, that's their country, that's their business. How they want to run their country is their country.
I'll give you an example.
We don't have the
In
right.
the Balkan Wars, we fought Serbia specifically to help Muslims who were being oppressed by the Serbs. There was genocide going on in Bosnia.
That's right.
Srebrenica is a good example.
That's right.
And the West, under Clinton and Bush, Clinton and Blair in particular, led the campaign to oppose and bomb Belgrade.
That's right.
To stop Milosevic killing Muslims.
That's right.
So we do have the duty, I would argue, in some instances, to interfere in other countries. It's a difficult area of international law, I'm sure, but there are times when the oppression of this population in the modern world, where we could see what's going on, is so severe as to warrant an intervention.
Greg, first of
In
all,
Sierra Leone, the same thing happened. We had people in Sierra Leone killing and maiming civilians, and Britain sent in the Marines to stop it, and they stopped it. So sometimes it's right to intervene. Now,
Greg, I'm not saying every military action America and Britain or Europe have been engaged in has been completely unlawful, unjustifiable. I was in Indonesia after the tsunami that struck there, and I saw many American warships. I stayed the night in an American camp with soldiers all around me, right? Me and 3 other brothers. They all had long beards and like proper traditional Muslims. And I had all the American GIs, Marines, and everyone all around with uniform, very respectful. They gave us food. I slept in their tent, right? And I saw all the good works that they were doing.
Recognise all the aid that the West gives to the third world.
No, but listen to what I'm saying, Greg. I'm not one of those people who's polarized in my view. West is bad. East is good. Arab is good. Islam is good. All Muslims are good. Islam is good.
I know.
All Muslims are good and perfect. And you know, the West and the white man and the not bad. I don't look at it like that. There are lots of grey areas. Do I say what Blair and Clinton did when they bombed Belgrade to stop the genocide? I think it was a wonderful thing. My only criticism would be that Europe waited too long.
I agree with that too.
It went on for, I think, 2 or 3 years?
I agree. Europe was slow.
We had reports in this country, I remember reading those reports, where the Serb soldiers had rape houses, and girls as young as 9 and 8 and 10 were being repeatedly raped.
I didn't know that.
If you go and study the archives, it was really hurtful. For me, as seeing myself more European than anything else, being born and brought up in this country, I couldn't understand how Europe was standing by while mass rapes and mass killings and genocides were going on.
I'm not sure that the mass rapes that you claim happened were publicised.
You can go back and study them. No, they were publicised.
The massacres
on BBC, on everywhere.
The fact that in Srebrenica we knew what was happening when it happened. That said, the defence I would make, it's as I said, I think the West was too slow to respond.
Yeah.
But the defence I would make is simply that after World War II, there was such a horror at a war which was largely fought on European soil and it cost 30 million lives. The German army basically banned having was reduced to a small unit which had almost no capacity to wage any sort of conflict whatsoever. So basically, there was a reluctance on the part of the Europeans and the Germans in particular to get involved.
But you know what, Greg? You know,
as a consequence, when a war broke out in the Balkans, they were very slow to react against it.
They were. And Greg, you know what upset me as a European, as a Muslim born in this country, was that had that been the Muslim Yugoslavian groups raping Christian white girls and women in Yugoslavia, it would have been stopped almost immediately.
A, you don't know that. B, I'm not convinced that your story about the rape house is true.
It's very easily to research.
I'll Google it.
Please do Google it, but it's very, very easy to research. And I think there was a reluctance because it was Muslims. However, I would still say, Greg, that the actions by
European Muslims, in other words, they weren't even ethnic Arabs.
No.
A lot of these people were basically ethnically the same as the Serbs.
Same, exactly.
They had been converted to Islam when the Ottomans came in.
That's right.
And as a consequence, it wasn't even a racial thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not so convinced it was a religious thing. I think it was the fact that they were deeply reluctant to get involved in fighting on European soil.
What the Yugoslavians said? They said, the Muslims, they said, we were just like the Serbs. We were just like the Croats. We drank with them.
Yeah, they used to live side by side.
We married them.
I know. I'm not defending the Serbs.
We were exactly the same. But today they're killing us only because we have a Muslim name.
Well, it's the same thing happened in Rwanda, of course.
You know, Hutu, Tutsi, yeah, that's right. For
decades.
That's
and yet,
right.
Once the massacre started, they were easily persuaded.
That's right. That's right. That's right. But anyway, look, Greg, my point to you is that Islam has the capacity to have an expansive war. And it also has the capacity to form treaties, and it has to abide by those treaties. So, and this is not unusual because every country would, even today, you look at Dick Cheney on the Trevor McDonald program when he spoke to Trevor McDonald, Dick Cheney, he said, the reasons as to why we went into Iraq are irrelevant. What's relevant is that it was in the American interest. It was in our interest. We could not have Saddam Hussein holding America to ransom because what he was doing was he wanted to deal with the euros when it comes to the oil. He didn't want to deal in dollars anymore. Gaddafi wanted to deal in the Arabian dinar, gold.
That's simplistic.
He didn't want to deal with
the reason we invaded Iraq is not because he was dealing in non-dollars.
No, he wanted to deal in euros.
He was invaded the first time because he'd invaded Kuwait. The West would not have touched him, as much as we held our nose with Saddam Hussein. And of course, there was a period when, because he opposed Iran, during a time when we had great tensions with Iran, we supported him in the war against Iran. Maybe with some material, at least diplomatically. However, he was a brutal, ruthless, autocratic bastard.
No, nobody's going to deny that.
And it was committing genocide against his own people. So, was it right to go and oppose him? Ultimately, yes, I think it was. I think the weapons of mass destruction were always a distraction. I didn't believe he had them. He did once. At one point, he did have them.
Look,
he used gas against his own people.
Okay, that was when Rumsfeld sold in the gas in '86 or something. Yeah.
After the first invasion, he had been defenestrated of his ability to wage war.
Well, he was already. Look, correct. He had 30-year-old tanks.
He set missiles against Israel.
Scud missiles. What were they? A joke? Come on, you know they were. That was a joke, right?
To a certain extent.
I mean, there was no threat. Look, let's be honest here.
But he was the author of his own downfall because he invaded Kuwait, which he killed.
And he was.
Putin, I think, ultimately is the author of his own downfall this week. Putin will not long-term survive this, because the whole world has rebelled against what he's done.
Yeah.
Putin's made a classic strategic mistake. A bit like Hitler did when he invaded Russia in 1941. He bit off more than he can chew. He'll be able to subdue Ukraine, but he will never be welcomed back into the Council of Nations.
Yeah,
we won't trust him ever again.
The point that I'm trying to make to you is that nations, regardless of colour or race, have the propensity to conduct themselves in just or unjust wars. But as a Muslim, I believe that we have certain guidances within Islam that, if followed and adhered to the teachings, would bar you from doing much of the atrocities that we've seen around the world. Now, does that mean that all Muslims have adhered to all of those tenets and teachings? No, I'm not arguing that.
I'm saying a fairly rose-coloured view of Islam, but
I'm saying that, look, in Islam, for example, warfare, the Prophet ﷺ said you cannot kill women, you cannot kill children, you cannot cut down trees, you cannot kill animals. You can only fight those who are on the battlefield fighting you. And if you have prisoners of war, you have to treat them well. You have to feed them what you eat. You can't abuse them and murder them and kill them. And when, for example, Umar Khattab, the second Caliph, learnt that one of his generals had killed certain people, he said, I'm free of this.
I've got to go, but I will say, in parting, your view of Muhammad is fairly rose-coloured as well, because he was a warlord, he had a private army, and he killed a lot of people.
No, I would disagree with you. And I'll tell you, but Greg, I'll tell you why I disagree with you on that point. Is that even the recent discussion with Professor Jordan Peterson and hijab, and Jordan Peterson said exactly what you just said about Muhammad being a warmonger.
No, he was a warlord.
Warlord, right? And I think hijab challenged him on that point. And I think Peterson agreed that perhaps it was not the correct terminology to use, because there are many examples where you could use that word, warlord, but Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not have been one of those people.
Did he not massacre 600 Jews at some famous battle?
No, that's not. It wasn't 600 in a battle. It was. There were 3 Jewish tribes in Medina, the largest tribes: Banu Qurayza, Banu Nadir, Banu Qaynuqa. And they had treaties with the Muslims that they would not side with the pagans to attack Medina. Banu Qurayza, this particular tribe, broke the treaty on more than one occasion. Then finally what happened was, when the conquest of, when the war against the Muslims happened, the big war, which was the, where they attacked Medina, all of the pagan tribes got together to attack Medina. Banu Qurayza, who were in their forts behind the walls of Medina, sided with the pagans to attack the Muslims from behind.
You're inventing good history.
No. This is well known. This is well known, and I'll tell you why that's substantiated. Because the other 2 tribes in Medina were not killed. They were not attacked.
I was too busy killing the first tribe.
No. And what happened was, the Prophet ﷺ said, you have a choice. Either you try under Jewish law for what you've done, the treachery that you've done, or under Islamic law. Because under both of these laws, treason is a capital punishment. So all male adults over the age of puberty were executed, because that under Jewish and Islamic law. And in fact, in America, if you are there still is a death penalty if you commit treason.
Of course, it's regardless of the most heinous
Yes,
crimes.
in England.
It depends how you define treason, of course.
But in England, it's not currently the death penalty, but at times of war, we can bring back the death penalty for treason.
I didn't know that. The Kurds don't have the death penalty.
I'm educating you.
Good
Greg,
to talk to you.
Nice to meet you. See you later.